Today I'd like to talk about one of the most important recent developments in European cybersecurity regulations, the Cyber Resilience Act, officially Regulation 2847. So the main aim of the Cyber Resilience Act is simple but crucial: to enhance the security of products placed on the EU market, both hardware and software, so that these products contain fewer vulnerabilities and remain secure throughout their life cycle. So this is not just a sector-specific law. The CRA is a horizontal product safety regulation, meaning it applies to many industries, from consumer electronics to industrial control systems, and its requirements will become an integral part of the CE marking process, which already serves as a declaration that a product complies with EU safety and performance standards. So this means that in the future, meeting the cybersecurity requirements of the CRA will be mandatory for any product to be legally marketed or sold in the EU. So in other words, compliance with the CRA will be a precondition for market access. So under the new regulation, manufacturers bear full responsibility for the cybersecurity of their products, not only at launch, but throughout the entire product lifecycle. So they must assess and mitigate risks, manage vulnerabilities, and ensure continuous security updates. Another key feature of the CRA is transparency. So manufacturers will have to clearly communicate the cybersecurity posture of their devices and software, including the duration of security support for each product. And this then empowers consumers and organizations to make informed choices about the products they buy and deploy. So the Cyber Resilience Act represents a major step forward in Europe's digital security landscape. It pushes the entire technology ecosystem, from developers to distributors, to take cybersecurity seriously by design and by default. So by improving transparency, accountability, and lifecycle protection, the Act aims to make the European digital single market safer, more trustworthy, and more resilient. So now let's then take a closer look at which products the Cyber Resilience Act actually applies to, because its scope is remarkably broad. So the Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA, applies to a large group of products, and one of its most significant impacts is that it brings software regulation to a new level. Up until now, most cybersecurity laws have focused primarily on hardware, but under the CRA, software is explicitly and comprehensively included. So the CRA applies to any device or software that contains a digital element and that can be connected directly or indirectly to another device or to a network. So that means if a product communicates, transmits data, or connects to the internet in any way, it will likely fall under the CRA. So to give you a sense of the range, this then includes, for instance, security cameras, smart televisions, and even connected toys, household routers and firewalls, video games, text processing software, and photo editing tools. So in other words, both consumer electronics and professional software applications are within the scope. But the CRA doesn't stop here. It also extends cybersecurity requirements to the core technologies that underpin our world nowadays, our digital world, such as then operating systems, web browsers, password management software, microprocessors, and microcontrollers. And this then ensures that not only end-user products, but also the fundamental components and platforms that other systems depend on meet strong cybersecurity standards. So in essence, the CRA recognizes that everything is connected and that cybersecurity must be built into every layer of our ecosystem nowadays, our digital ecosystem, from chips to cloud applications. So by regulating such a wide spectrum of products, the Act takes a comprehensive lifecycle approach to securing the digital market in Europe. So let's now turn our attention to one of the most dynamic and complex areas covered by the Cyber Resilience Act, the Internet of Things, or IoT. So the CRA doesn't treat IoT devices as ordinary products. Instead, it carefully considers their special characteristics, particularly their connectivity, control dependencies, and reliance on cloud-based components. So one key aspect of the regulation is that the control service typically linked to IoT devices, for example, the mobile app or web dashboard used to manage and perhaps adjust a smart thermostat, a connected camera, or even a industrial sensor is considered an integral part of the product itself. So that means manufacturers cannot separate the device's security from the security of its control service. If the product's safety depends on that service, both must meet cybersecurity requirements, the CRA's cybersecurity requirements. So the Act also takes into account cloud-based elements that interact with connected devices. So a cloud solution or any component used within it falls under the scope of the CRA if it qualifies as a remote data processing solution as defined in the regulation, and if the manufacturer is responsible for its development. So in other words, if the product's manufacturer designs or maintains a cloud backend that processes data, updates firmware, or manages remote functions, that cloud environment is also covered by the CRA's cybersecurity obligations. So, for instance, a cloud platform that enables remote control connections between devices and users, such as enabling a homeowner to view live footage from a smart security camera, would be included within the regulatory scope. The same applies to cloud components that facilitate software updates, device pairing, or telemetry collection, provided they are part of the product ecosystem controlled by the manufacturer. So, in short, the Cyber Resilience Act takes a holistic approach to cybersecurity in the IoT area. So it recognizes that a connected device is never just the physical hardware. It is an ecosystem involving firmware, applications, and cloud services. So by regulating all these components together, all of these, the CRA ensures that end-to-end security and also accountability are built into every connected product entering the European market. But while the Cyber Resilience Act has a very broad scope, it is also important to understand what does not fall under its application. So the regulation clearly identifies several specific categories of products that are excluded, primarily because they are already governed by other product-specific cybersecurity frameworks. For example, the Cyber Resilience Act does not apply to medical devices, in vitro diagnostic medical devices, certain vehicles, marine equipment, and aviation certified devices, such as aircraft. Also, a linguistic note for clarity. The term in vitro means within the glass, and it refers to tests or procedures performed outside a living organism, typically in laboratory environments. For example, diagnostic testing done using samples in a lab rather than in the human body. And the reason for these exclusions is that cybersecurity requirements already exist for these products within their own sector-specific regulations, such as medical device directives, automotive standards, and aviation certification frameworks. So in other words, the European Union is avoiding a regulatory overlap, ensuring that each sector continues to follow its specialized cybersecurity specifications. And the Cyber Resilience Act also does not apply to products intended solely for national security or defense, or those used exclusively for processing classified material. So these products fall under separate national and EU level frameworks designed to address security needs that go beyond civilian markets. So, in a summary, while the CRA is a comprehensive and far-reaching regulation, it also recognizes the importance of coherence and specialization. So by exempting sectors that already have robust cybersecurity provisions, such as healthcare, automotive, marine, and aviation, and by excluding defense and classified systems, the Cyber Resilience Act ensures that regulatory efforts remain targeted, efficient, and non-duplicative. So as we move forward to the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act, it's important to understand not only the obligations for manufacturers and developers, but also for the notified bodies that will play a key role in ensuring compliance. So the obligations concerning notified bodies will apply from 11th of June next year. That is 18 months after the regulation officially has entered into force. And this transition period gives the member states in EU accreditation authorities and companies time to prepare for the new certification and conformative landscape. A notified body must meet two main sets of requirements to be called a notified body. The competence requirements laid down for accreditation and the obligations set out directly in the CRA, particularly those detailed in Articles 39, 49, and 51, and also in Annex 8 of the regulations are things that a notified body must meet. In Finland, for instance, the work of notified bodies is considered a public administrative duty. This then means that they must comply with the general laws governing public administration, including transparency, impartiality, and accountability requirements. So the personnel of a notified body are required to have strong technical and regulatory expertise. Specifically, they must possess a solid understanding of the essential cybersecurity requirements outlined in Annex 1 of the CRA, the applicable harmonized standards and common specifications, and also the relevant provisions of EU harmonization legislation and implementing acts. So in practice, this means that notified bodies must be equipped to assess cybersecurity not only from a technical perspective, but also from a regulatory and procedural one. So to support consistent implementation, CENELEC and also ETSI, the European Standardization Organizations, have already launched the preparation of harmonized standards under the CRA. And these standards will then provide the technical reference points that manufacturers and notified bodies can use to demonstrate compliance with the regulation's essential requirements. Also, an important point is that companies have the opportunity to participate in this ongoing standardization work. Doing so is an excellent way to influence the development of requirements early on and to prepare for the future activities of a notified body. In Finland, standardization activities are coordinated by Finnish Standards or SFS, Traficom, and also SESCO. However, it is worth noting that participation in standardization work may be subject to fees, so organizations should then plan accordingly. And in summary, one could say that notified bodies will form the backbone of the CRA's conformity assessment system. So if you want to be a part of this, then you should perhaps be in contact with the mentioned bodies. But if you are a part of the conformity assessment system, you will ensure that products entering the EU market truly meet the regulations' cybersecurity expectations as you then want to see. And the combination of strong competence requirements, transparent public oversight, and active participation in European standardization will also be essential to building the secure, trusted digital ecosystem that we all want in Europe. So, yes, with many major European regulations, the Cyber Resilience Act introduces a carefully planned transition period to give manufacturers, authorities, and notified bodies enough time to adapt to the new. So, let's take a brief look at what this means in practice. So the requirements applying to the security properties of products will be implemented with a transition period of 36 months. This means that by the 11th of December 2027, all products placed on the EU market must fully comply with the essential cybersecurity requirements laid down in the regulation. So in other words, from that date onward, which is 11th of December 2027, every connected product, whether hardware or software, must be secure by design, secure by default, and secure throughout its life cycle. So these essential requirements cover all aspects of a product's digital resilience, from secure design and development practices to vulnerability handling, update management, and incident reporting. Manufacturers must embed cybersecurity principles into every phase, from concept and coding to production and post-market maintenance. So in Finland, the Ministry of Transport and Communications will be responsible for the national implementation of the regulation. This means that the ministry will oversee how the CRA's provisions are applied in practice, coordinating with national authorities, notified bodies, and industry stakeholders to ensure a smooth rollout and consistent compliance. So under the CRA, manufacturers carry primary responsibility for ensuring that their products comply with the cybersecurity requirements. They must guarantee that every product is designed, developed, and produced in line with the essential cybersecurity criteria of the regulation. So one could say that compliance is not optional. It is a prerequisite for market access. If you want to take part in the market that the EU has, then you must have this already integrated in your product or system. So importantly, the CE marking will serve as a visible indicator that a product meets the CRA's cybersecurity requirements. So in the future, when a consumer or business sees a CE mark on a connected product, it will not only signify safety and quality, but also trust in its cybersecurity integrity. So to summarize, just to make sure, the transition period lasts 36 months, ending on the 11th of December 2027. From that point on, all products entering the EU market must comply with the CRA's essential cybersecurity requirements. National institutes, such as Finland's Ministry of Transport and Communications, will guide the implementation. And manufacturers will be fully responsible for embedding cybersecurity into every stage of their product lifecycle, with the CE marking as a proof of compliance. So the message is very clear that is to be sent out. Cybersecurity will become a fundamental regulated quality attribute for every digital product on the European market. So let's now explore the heart of the Cyber Resilience Act, the essential cybersecurity requirements that will define how then products must be designed, developed, and maintained in the European market. The more specific content of these cybersecurity requirements is detailed in Article 13 and Annex 1 of the Cyber Resilience Act 2847. And these sections form the technical and legal backbone of the regulation. So the requirements will apply to products placed on the EU market after the 11th of December 2027. So it's important to remember that a product is considered placed on the market when it's made available for the first time, whether that's through sale, distribution, or any other form of supply within the EU. This means that from that date onward, every new connected product must comply with the CRA's cybersecurity principles before it can be legally introduced to the market. So a key feature of the CRA is that cybersecurity requirements are implemented on the basis of risk. This then ensures that the level of protection applied to a product corresponds to the potential impact, both in terms of cybersecurity threats and user safety. So in other words, higher risk products will face more stringent obligations, while lower risk devices will follow proportionate requirements. So the regulation outlines then a range of essential measures that products must meet. Among these, some of the most critical include that there are secure default settings and automatic security updates. There is prevention of unauthorized access. There is confidential and minimal storage of data. And also securing of key functionalities to ensure resilience against cyber attacks is an essential measure. And these principles reflect a fundamental shift. Cybersecurity is no longer to be an afterthought. It must be embedded by design and by default in every product entering the European digital ecosystem. The harmonized standards and technical specifications will elaborate in more detail how these requirements can then be fulfilled. They will serve as the practical industry-level guidance for manufacturers and developers, outlining specific controls, testing methods, and best practices. And once finalized, these harmonized standards will be published in the official journal of the European Union, giving them legal standing as a recognized path to compliance. So to summarize the things that I have said on this slide, one could say that the essential cybersecurity requirements are defined in Article 13 and Annex 1 of the CRA. They will apply to all products placed on the EU market from the 11th of December 2027 onwards. The framework is risk-based, ensuring proportionate security for each product type. The requirements include secure configuration, data protection, access control, and the safeguarding of core functionalities. And also, finally, the harmonized standards will provide the technical blueprint for meeting these obligations in practice. So, in essence, this CRA sets the foundation for a secure digital single market, where every connected product is resilient by design, compliant by law, and trusted, hopefully, by the users. One of the most crucial elements of the Cyber Resilience Act is its focus on vulnerability management and reporting. The EU's goal here is clear: to ensure that cybersecurity risks are not only identified but also communicated quickly and transparently so that users and authorities can respond effectively. So the obligations related to vulnerability reporting will begin to apply from the 11th of September 2026, that is 21 months after the entry into force of the regulation. This gives manufacturers and market operators just under a very short time, let's see, about a year, to establish or adapt their internal reporting processes and incident response workflows. So it's important to emphasize that these requirements apply to all covered products on the EU market, not just those newly placed on the market. So in other words, even products that are already in circulation and that remain available to users will fall under the scope of these vulnerability reporting obligations. So from the 11th of September 2026 onward, manufacturers must report and actively exploited vulnerabilities discovered in their products must be informed to two key bodies. So the relevant Computer Security Incident Response Team, CIRT, and the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA. This represents a major shift in the cybersecurity landscape of EU, creating then a unified continent-wide framework for vulnerability disclosure and response. A key point to note is that this obligation applies not only to new products but also to existing ones. So even if a product was placed on the EU market before the CRA took effect, the manufacturer must still comply with the reporting and notification requirements once the timeline begins. So beyond regulatory reporting, the CRA also establishes a direct obligation towards users. Manufacturers must inform their users whenever a vulnerability is identified that could affect their product, and importantly, they must also provide guidance on how to mitigate or repair the issue. And this reinforces the Act's emphasis on transparency and shared responsibility in cybersecurity. Users are no longer passive recipients of security updates. They become informed participants in maintaining digital resilience. And to summarize what I have said on this slide, the vulnerability reporting obligations begin on the 11th of September 2026. That is to say 21 months after the CRA enters into force. They apply to all covered products on the EU market, including those already in use. And manufacturers must report actively exploited vulnerabilities to ENISA and CIRT. They must also inform users about the vulnerabilities and provide clear remediation guidance. So in essence, this part of the Cyber Resilience Act builds a bridge between the manufacturers, regulators, and users. The goal is to ensure that vulnerabilities are identified, shared, and resolved before they can be exploited at scale. One of the most operationally significant aspects of the Cyber Resilience Act concerns how manufacturers must then handle the reporting of vulnerabilities and incidents that affect the security of their products. This process then ensures that authorities and users are informed promptly, helping to reduce risks, coordinate responses, and strengthen trust in the European ecosystem of digital world. Under the CRA, manufacturers have two core reporting obligations. They must report actively exploited vulnerabilities found in their products, and severe incidents that have an impact on the security or functioning of the product. And these are not optional actions. They are mandatory steps designed to ensure that potential threats are addressed in a consistent, transparent, and timely manner across the European Union. So when an incident is considered significant and the manufacturer also falls within the scope of the NIS2 directive, then an NIS notification must also be submitted. So in essence, CRA and NIS2 work hand in hand, ensuring that major cybersecurity incidents affecting both digital products and the essential entities are reported in a harmonized way. So the notification practices under the CRA follow the same principles as the NIS2 directive, creating then a unified model for incident reporting. So this means that the first notification must be submitted within 24 hours of detecting the vulnerability or incident. A further detailed notification must then be submitted within 72 hours. And this two-step reporting structure ensures that authorities are alerted quickly while allowing manufacturers time to gather additional technical information for a comprehensive follow-up. Beyond mandatory reports, the CRA also allows for voluntary notifications. Manufacturers, examiners of vulnerabilities, and other relevant actors can proactively notify the national CERT or NISA of vulnerabilities contained in a product or cyber threats that could affect its risk profile. Even near-miss situations, incidents that did not cause harm but could have, can be reported voluntarily. And this culture of collaborative transparency is essential to building a proactive, resilient cybersecurity environment across the EU. So to streamline these processes, the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA, is developing a centralized system for vulnerability notifications. And once operational, this platform will serve as a single point of contact for reporting vulnerabilities and incidents, improving coordination between manufacturers, CERT, and EU authorities. So to summarize this slide, manufacturers must report actively exploited vulnerabilities and severe security incidents. If the incident is significant and falls under NIS2, a NIS notification is also required. Initial reports are due within 24 hours, then followed by a detailed report within 72 hours. And also voluntary notifications are encouraged to enhance collective resilience. And ENISA is creating a centralized EU-wide reporting system to make this process efficient and transparent. So the goal is that cybersecurity is not reactive, but coordinated, proactive, and accountable. The goal has been to strengthen Europe's capability to detect, respond to, and prevent cyber threats at every level of the digital supply chain. So let's now look at what it actually means to place a product on the market under the European Union's Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA, and what manufacturers must do to ensure compliance before, during, and after that moment. So what placing on the market means actually is that in EU law, placing a product on the market means making it available on the European Union's market for the first time. In practice, this happens when a device is brought into the EU from a third country, or a product manufactured within the EU leaves the production site and enters the supply chain. So it is important to note that this assessment is done separately for each individual device, meaning that every unit must meet the same conformity requirements. So the manufacturer's core responsibility is then that before a product is placed on the EU market, the manufacturer must ensure its conformity with the CRA. So the Cyber Resilience Act applies to all products sold within the EU that contain digital elements, whether hardware or software. And the regulation sets out requirements for the product's technical properties, as well as for its documentation and markings. And once a product then fully complies with the CRA, it can move freely within the entire European Union without any additional national restrictions. Crucially, the CRA does not end with market entry. It imposes obligations throughout the entire life cycle of the product. So, how do you then place the product on the market? Well, let's then break it into these 4 key phases that you see on this slide. Number 1, the product is developed. So the process begins with design and development. At this stage, the manufacturer must familiarize themselves with the Cyber Resilience Act and its essential cybersecurity requirements. You need to read through the CRA. Then you naturally develop a digital product, whether it is then software or a connected device that can then be safely integrated into networks. You conduct a risk assessment and implement the necessary security properties based on the level of risk identified. And this is where cybersecurity by design and by default begins. Then we have step 2. The conformity of the product is assessed. So after the first step comes conformity assessment, a critical checkpoint before market placement. So the manufacturer must determine the appropriate conformity assessment procedure. In some cases, this may involve third-party evaluation by a notified body or obtaining a cybersecurity certificate under EU schemes. So the product must pass the assessment and fully comply with the CRA's requirements before it can proceed to market. Step 3. The product is placed on the market. So once conformity is confirmed, the product can officially enter the market. But certain formal steps are required first. The manufacturer must prepare an EU declaration of conformity, compile all necessary technical documentation, affix the CE marking to the product, and clearly indicate the support period. That is, how long the manufacturer will maintain updates and security patches. And the CE marking now serves as a visible guarantee of cybersecurity compliance under the CRA. And we also have step 4, post-market monitoring. So the compliance doesn't end once the product is sold. You cannot then forget it when you have sold the product. After placement on the market, the manufacturer remains responsible for post-market surveillance and maintenance. So They must then monitor vulnerabilities and repair them in line with the product's risk assessment. Report any vulnerabilities or incidents to ENISA and CERT, and update the risk assessment whenever new threats or changes occur. So if significant modifications are made to the product, its conformity must be reassessed to ensure it still meets CRA requirements. So to summarize, placing a product on the EU market under the Cyber Resilience Act is not a single event. It's a process that might take long, and it's a process of continuous responsibility. It begins with secure design, continues through conformity assessment and CE marking, and then extends into ongoing maintenance and reporting. And by embedding then cybersecurity into every stage, from concept to post-market support, manufacturers not only achieve compliance, but also can build trust, resilience, and market confidence across the European Union. And this has been the goal of this act. So, thank you.